Hello and welcome along to the Property Academy podcast. I'm your host, Ed McKnight.
And I'm Andrew Nicoll.
And today on the show, we're talking about breaking up with your broker. When to do it, how to do it. Well, you know, the sad thing is, but the true thing is, Andrew, not all relationships last, as you know. And this actually comes from a listener of the show, David, who says, look, we've used a local broker to purchase our first home, our first investment property. We've got all our personal insurance there. But look, moving forwards, I feel there may be some better value, some better support elsewhere, but understand that they've got some ongoing trail commissions, etc. So let's dig into this. And I think the first thing to recognise is that sometimes it is the right decision for you, and you've got to make the right decision for you and your investment portfolio to break up with your broker and to move on. And that's unfortunate, but it's true. And that might be because you don't think their ongoing service has been what you would expect, and things like that. So, but let's start by asking the question, Andrew, how often should a mortgage broker be in contact, and what is an appropriate level of service?
Well, so for long-term listeners of the show, you'll probably remember that I was a broker for a number of years and actually technically still have my broker accreditation. And I guess I was probably the worst possible broker because I'd never really contact my clients unless they needed me. I mean, we had automatic emails with rate refixes or something like that, but I could get anything approved. So I guess at the end of the day, it comes down to what you want. If you want to have a chit chat with your broker every few months and kind of reassess your position and adjust your numbers and do updated evaluations and kind of figure things out, Andrew Nicoll was not the right broker for you. If you wanted to get an approval every time you possibly could, Andrew Nicoll was. But don't expect a fluffy email and a Christmas card and a phone call every 5 minutes. So it does depend on what category you fall into. Someone like New Zealand Home Loans, who are a broker firm who specialise in debt reduction, for example, they have a much more hands-on approach with clients. So they will show someone who works with them how to repay their loan, and they'll sit down with you every few months and they'll set you up with their software, which is amazing, DebtNav, and show people who are really conscious of getting their personal mortgage paid off faster how to do it. But because they've got more limitations around number of lenders, for someone who's got, say, 30 rental properties, that might not be right for them. So it does come down to your individual needs and maybe timing in life as well. So I noticed in David's notes, he said that he's got his home and he's got his personal insurances, everything all with the one broker firm. Now, I've got a pretty firm opinion about this. If you're using one broker, one person to do absolutely everything, you probably don't have a specialist, generally speaking, because it's hard to be a specialist in everything. So, for example, with us, we are residential investment specialists. Nothing else, nothing more, not commercial property, not all these other kind of fancy things that you can do on property investment like renovations. Right now, watch this space. But we specialise and we're the best at a particular thing. And I think it's the same with mortgages and insurance. And as a broker, I'd have the odd client that might say, "Hey, look, we're not the right fit," and they might break up with me, and that's okay as well, because you want to know that you're going to be able to work well together on an ongoing basis. So just thinking about the commission side of things. So the way a broker gets paid, generally speaking, is they receive a commission from the bank for placing your mortgage with that bank. And different banks have different amounts, different percentages, and some of them have this thing called trail commission. Now, for example, you probably get a more discounted upfront commission if you're getting a trail commission. So for complete example, you might get 40 basis points paid to you upfront if you place a loan with B and Z, and I'm just making these numbers up, by the way, and then you might get an additional 20 points every year. And the idea of that 20 points every year is that you're providing ongoing service to that client, and there should be a certain level of service. I mean, I was doing this years ago where they weren't as strict with kind of having those annual reviews, and I'd probably do that, but again, it would be a 15-minute catch up over a coffee, figuring out whether or not the loan was still right, and then carrying on. But if your loan was fixed for 3 years, there's probably not a lot to chat about. So I'd keep those things tight and just kind of work on the next side of things. But that's what the trail commission is for. If you break up with your broker, often what will happen is that trail commission will cease for them, but that's not the end of the world. And if you're a really good professional broker, you accept that and you don't make your client feel bad for breaking up with you, because it's not personal. This is just a business transaction. And I think it's really admirable that David's considering, the negative effect on the broker. But I would just be really upfront in those situations. I'd email and say, hey, thanks for all the work you've done for me in the years. I'm really working on expanding my portfolio. And so I've met this broker who specialises in that. And we think that we're a good fit. And so, again, thank you very much for your work. If I need anything else, I'd be happy to come back to you. And or if they specialise in first homes or something like that, happy to put another first home buyers in touch with you, or debt management, etc. Do that kind of thing.
Now, what I want to know though as well, Andrew, is it going to cost me if I change my broker? So, for instance, let's say that I've got a mortgage that's been fixed for 12 months. I'm 6 months through that. I change my broker. Do I have to pay any break fees if I want to do anything, or does it just roll off at the end of that 6 months and we refix?
No, so a broker gets paid, but generally there is a clawback period in their commission. So, for example, if you draw down a loan and the broker gets paid, if that loan is repaid within, say, I think it's usually 2 or 3 years nowadays, if the loan's repaid because you've refinanced away to KiwiBank, then often there will be a clawback. Now, it depends whether or not you have to pay that to the broker. And I remember, 15 years ago when I was doing mortgages, I would actually have in my terms of engagement that if you refinanced away from me, or you it wasn't a change in circumstances like a divorce or something like that, and I incurred a clawback of my commission because you just decided you're going to move to KiwiBank and get a better rate than what I'd set you up as, then I would charge you that clawback fee. And that was in my terms of engagement, and clients accepted that at the start. If it's not in there, then I would argue the point that actually you don't have to pay that. But generally speaking, if it's in there, you'd have to pay that. And to be fair, of maybe the 10 times that might have occurred across my career, I think I only enforced it once, and it was just because the people moved to something that was exactly the same somewhere else and just didn't believe me that it was the same. And funnily enough, they ended up coming back and I refunded them the money afterwards.
And ballpark, just because I know people will be thinking about it, hearing that, what was the clawback? How much did these people have to pay, ballpark?
I think it was a couple of grand. It wasn't major significant, but your arrangements with the banks as far as break fees go, when you fix into a fixed rate term, and this is actually quite important to think about now, because with rates coming down, there can be a significant economic loss to a bank. So if you fix at 3% and the rate drops to 1.5%, that 1.5% difference between the current rate and the rate you're paying and the remainder term, so if you fix for 3 years, you're a year into it, you'll have to pay that back to the bank. And so you pay that break fee back to the bank regardless. Now, that's got nothing to do with the commission that the broker's got paid. And again, if it's in the terms of engagement that you've got to pay them back, then you're up for that as well.
And I guess one key thing then that people are going to be interested in is seeing that if they've got a terms of engagement with their broker, is that in there before you move away? Because you might decide that you might just wait until that period is up before you go ahead and move along to another broker, or move that specific loan to another broker.
Yes, well, the other thing is now, often when you receive a cash back from the bank, so when you take out a mortgage, you might get $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 worth of cash back, cash incentive with the bank, and often you'll sign something with the bank to say that you have to stay there for a few years, because in the first kind of year, they don't really make any money out of you, so they want to recoup that cost of acquisition. And I think back when I was at the BNZ, it cost about 2.5 times the amount of lending to replace a client than if you lost one. You'd think banks would do a better job retaining their clients at that rate, but anyway, it is what it is, which I hate that saying, but anyway, it is what it is. And if you sign something to say you're going to stay with BNZ for 3 years minimum because you've received this $5,000 set up cash contribution, then probably all the stars align and your broker's not going to get penalised or anything like that.
Now, what I want to know as well is am I going to lose any coverage? So let's say that my new broker doesn't work with the same banks or insurers. And this might be an instance like with New Zealand Home Loans, which tends to only work with one or two lenders. So for instance, Kiwi Bank and Sovereign. What if I want to go and pick up my loans, and I've got a couple of them, and then move on to another mortgage broker?
Now, just to clarify there, New Zealand Home Loans, yes, Kiwi Bank and Sovereign or ASB now would be their two main kind of bank funders, but they actually have a bunch of non-bank lenders as well. So there are other options. And I know that there are New Zealand Home Loans brokers out there who are maybe a bit more investment savvy, and so they might also have other relationships. They might not necessarily be paid for that, but they might, say, for example, be able to set up your deposits, refer you on to a contact at BNZ, for example, and have the mortgage set up. So there's potentially not necessarily the same limitation as just assuming that they only have a couple of providers, but it is one thing to consider. If, for example, your broker has an accreditation with Kiwi Bank, and Kiwi Bank are pretty rare in terms of who they deal with as far as the broker fraternity, and you then move to a broker that doesn't have Kiwi Bank and one of your loans is there, you just have to be aware that you can't use that broker to deal with Kiwi Bank or your Kiwi Bank loan.
So I guess the next question, Andrew, is how do I actually break up with my broker? And, will my new broker do it for me? I know that generally speaking, if it's a bank, for instance, the bank will often go ahead and just move a loan across. Will a broker do that for me?
Yes and no, it depends on the bank. So there are actually particular banks, and often they are when they pay a trail commission. So, for example, BNZ have a disengagement form that you must sign to say, I no longer want to date this guy, I'm going to date this guy. And you have to sign off on it, and then they will let the other broker know that they've been broken up with. And my advice here, and again, having been a broker, is just tell them in advance. And I guess it is like one of those breakup conversations. Write an email, Dear John, and just say, hey, look, I think the best thing is, if they have done a good job, say thanks very much for the years of service that you've given me. We've had some fun times together, and tell them what it is that, the reason is. And look, at the end of the day, they're a professional. And if they treat you anything other than professionally, then bugger them. But normally speaking, they will say, hey, thanks very much for the feedback. I actually had an investor of mine ring me the other day because one of the brokers that I work with on a regular basis is too busy right now, and he's a victim of his own success. And he said, hey, look, it's this guy's great, but he said, I can't look at your file till February. I need to find someone else. What do I do? And my advice was just tell him the truth. And he said, will he be cross? And I said, well, he might be a bit disappointed, but you need this kind of feedback. To be the best, you need feedback. And so he wrote him an email and he copied me in and just said, hey, look, thanks very much. It's been great dealing with you. And right now you're just too busy to be able to get me the speedy approval that I require. So I am going to use someone else and would love to work with you in the future again, and happy to refer you anyone else in your area, which I thought was really respectful. And the broker emailed back and said, hey, look, completely understand. I did drop the ball on this. Look forward to working with you in the future. So that's a great result for all.
Fantastic. Let's wrap it up there. But please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Really helps us get the message out to more people. And hey, if you've got a topic that you'd like Andrew and I to talk about, give us a text. Our number is 5522. That's how we got this exact topic which we're talking about today. Would be great to hear from you. Thanks for listening to the Property Academy podcast. I'm your host, Ed McKnight.
And I'm Andrew Nicoll.
And we're going to be back again tomorrow with even more daily strategies, tactics and insights to help you get the most out of the New Zealand property market. Until next time.